Rain, rain, go away, come back, never. Seriously, come back, never. Sadly, we've had about a day and a half of rain here in Miami. Had a little pocket Friday evening, and hopefully we'll have another dry pocket soon, and then it'll be continued smooth sailing. But in the meanwhile, what a pleasure at our Tennis Channel Cadillac desk. Mr. Stine, I have been looking to speak to you here for quite a minute, so thank you for taking time away from your busy schedule to come and chit-chat with us.
Not so busy today. Not yet, anyway. We're hoping that it gets busier as the day goes on.
Brad, there's so many different things I want to get into you with, but first let's talk about Tommy, because you've done such a wonderful job with him. Tell us a little bit about that relationship, because the communication between a player and coach, that's everything before you even get to the tennis.
Yeah, thank you, first of all, for the compliment. Appreciate it. And I came in contact with Tommy originally. I took a job with the USTA for a little while, and Tommy was there as a junior. I think I met him originally when he was 14 or 15. Wow. And he was working with the other group of juniors, with Taylor Fritz and Opelka and Francis, and those guys were there on a regular basis. And so I got to see a lot of them. I didn't really get to spend a lot of time with them at first, but ironically, the first trip, I was kind of a filler for all the rest of the coaches when I first went to the USTA. And the very first trip that I went on was taking some of those guys to a future in Alabama. So that was my first experience with Tommy. And then, over the time that I was there, about 2.5 years that I was at the USTA, we got to know each other a little bit better. And through course of events, very fortuitously, I feel, for both of us, really, the timing was good. A lot of time in tennis, so much of it's about timing, getting a guy at the right time. He's prepared to be a little bit more coached maybe than he was when he was younger. And so that occurred for us in 2019. I was still working with Kevin Anderson. Kevin had an issue with his knee at the U.S. Open, pulled out of the tournament. I stayed around to actually do a bit of commentating. Got lucky. That was my first commentating gig. And Tommy was there playing qualies. He lost second round of qualies, and I literally DM'd him and just said, hey, bad luck. And that sparked a little bit of a conversation. He wasn't working with anyone at the time. And he asked me, knowing that Kevin was going to have knee surgery, he asked me if I would spend the fall with him, work with him through the rest of the fall. And I didn't really have any plans, and I said, sure, let's do it. And things went really well right away. He won his first challenger that we worked together. Won another challenger a few weeks later and made top 100 for the first time in his career. And so then at the end of the year, he asked me if I would work with him on a more full-time basis. And I was still committed to working with Kevin at the time, but I was really concerned that Kevin probably wasn't going to be able to play a full season the next year. He'd had a really rough time that previous year between the knee, and earlier in the year he had an issue with his elbow. And so in the end, I made the decision to make that switch and start working with Tommy, and we've been together ever since.
Well, it's gone beautifully, and I'd also just like the record to show that this relationship started by Mr. Brad Stine sliding into Tommy Paul's DMs. It's a story for another day.
Perfect. That's the modern way, right? That's how a relationship starts.
Hey,
at all levels.
What a beautiful relationship it has been. Last week, Indian Wells, just a continued evolution of Tommy's game. He played so well in Dallas, won it, finals at Delray Beach, continued semis last week, Indian Wells. He's been bringing a little bit of that old school back, studying a little bit of that, Becker, Pete, Edberg. So you've always firmly believed that executing that at a high level can still work in today's game.
Well, I mean, from a coaching standpoint, I've always been a believer in trying to develop complete players. That doesn't matter who you work with. You want to develop a player so that doesn't really have any holes in his game. With Tommy, that took on a whole different perspective in some ways, and I'm not giving away any secrets here or anything that he doesn't know that we haven't talked about, but as he started to develop and become a better and better player and was competing at the top levels of the game more and more often, we sat down early on and we discussed what his identity as a player was going to be. And it's been a process from when we started back in 2019. We literally have talked about Tommy 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0. We're on 5.0 right now. So originally it was getting him to be a little bit more aggressively minded in general, looking for more forehands. Tommy always has had a great backhand, super solid backhand, but it's tough to dominate the court with your backhand. So we started right away with that aspect, and then that morphed into a little bit more of trying to be a little more attacking. I always feel that that's a backwards progression. We spent 10 months, 11 months probably really specifically working on volleys without really talking a lot about transition. and then started talking more about transition. How do you come forward? Because I think you make a mistake as a coach if you ask a guy to start attacking, but you haven't really spent time working on the volleys. They come in, they get beat all the time because they're either out of position or the volley isn't as good as it should be. So I think last week in Indian Wells was really, because all the matches, not just the late matches with Casper or with Daniel that people may have seen a little bit more of, but he played Alex Mikkelsen in the first round, attacked like crazy, played Humbert second round, who's been hot as a firecracker since the start of the year, won 2 titles already, and attacked like crazy in that match, and so it was consistent through the week. We had talked a little bit about going into that week, these last 2 weeks of the hardcourt season for this year, before clay at least, trying to put a little bit more emphasis on attacking even more. And then, myself, I got to give more of the credit, honestly, to Franco Herrero, Tommy's strength and conditioning coach. He was the one that really started. They were staying together at an Airbnb. I was in a hotel. And just in the course of events, while his physio was working with him, Franco started putting on, matches from Rafter, Sampras, Henman. Tommy said, Tim Henman was like his favorite player, still kind of his favorite player. He met him here last year for the first time. He was super excited to meet him.
Love him.
And so watching those guys. But it's funny, just in the last week, I've been trying to, because every guy that he was watching was a one-hander, and Tommy's a two-hander. And so we were trying to think of guys. So now I told him he needs to watch Jonas Bjorkman.
Oh,
I was trying to think of a couple other guys.
Beast.
Jonas actually was the original kind of crush and rush guy.
Yep.
He did that way back when.
Yep.
So I think he's a good one for Tommy to watch also, And so we're trying to balance his ability to play from the ground when he has to and when he needs to, but always looking for opportunities to attack and put pressure on guys and come forward.
With all of these beautiful things coming together, are you guys fairly goal-oriented at all? Do you get specific in those?
You know what, Prakash, for us, this has gone back a while. Anybody that's followed Tommy's career closely at all knows that when Tommy was a little bit younger, he struggled a bit with his focus and his concentration, and that was an issue. And so one of the things that we did, probably 2.5 years ago, is that Tommy always has some goals for himself, and we talk about those things a little bit, but I really set the fact that my number one goal for him was that we show up to the court every day prepared to stay focused and concentrate and work through practice or matches or whatever it is, and do the absolute best that we can on a day-to-day basis. And if we're doing that, then hopefully Tommy's getting better a little bit each day. And so for me, it's more about the day-to-day goals, showing up, being professional, being on time for everything that you're doing, having a great attitude when you get to the court, and working your butt off to try and get better on that day, and then come back and do it again the next day. And hopefully that translates to playing your best tennis when you get to the tournaments.
That's that process-oriented mindset, not that results-oriented mindset. Mind of a champion. Love that. A huge pillar of a lot of the players that you've worked with, Tommy and most notably our Jim Courier as well, has been the physique that is brought to the players, the endurance, the beastness of the players. So tell us a little bit about how much of a beast Jim actually was at his prime.
Jim, I think Jim, without a doubt, I don't think anyone really argued with it too much, but he was the fittest guy on the tour when he played, back in those days. And Jim was just a different animal. He was built different, and he was able to push his body and deal with pain in the course of training that most guys couldn't do. And I used to always relate him. He played in an era with Sampras and Edberg and Becker and some of these guys that were just amazing racehorses. And I used to say Jim was more of a Clydesdale. He was, tie a wagon behind him and tell him he had to pull that thing for 10 hours. He was going to do it, But at the same time, Jim didn't get as much credit as he probably deserved for his movement. You go back and watch his matches now, people that watched him back in those days. How do you hit a forehand from the far deuce side of the court, and on the next ball you're hitting a forehand from the far ad side of the court? There's some serious explosiveness and movement in there, and I think Jim was a very explosive mover. He wasn't the fastest guy in the world, but he had some serious explosive movement. Those quads were pretty big back in those days.
He was magic to watch, and I was telling him too. He was rocking the short shorts way before Holger. Bringing up
but that was more the norm back then. That was everybody was wearing those 5-inch inseams.
Stine, I gotta say you're looking pretty buff too. You must be staying in the gym.
It's hard sitting next to you, dude. Come on. I see you in the gym all the time.
Listen, you're just doing such a fabulous job. Hope you continue to keep it going and crack some new records for you guys.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Brad Stine, ladies and gentlemen. keeping us some company here while it's raining, but I promise the rain is going away. We will have dry weather shortly, but stick around. As always, we got more tennis for you.